Hello, welcome back. It's Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony here on Wednesday, December 30th, 2020, just hours away pretty much from the start of 2021. So you see I have my little astro wheel here set to January 1st on 2021 at 12 a.m. Pacific time, what planets will look like then. And so what I wanted to do, like I said in my last video, if you watched it, that I would be back here just before the new year to talk about 2021 specifically. I have alluded to 2021 energies in a couple of my previous videos if you've watched those. If you have not, I recommend going back and watching those, especially the webinar that I did back in October. And that's the From Hierarchy to Sovereignty video. Lots of information in that. And I'll be talking or alluding to that video here today as well. So anyway, hope everybody is having a happy holidays as much as we can, given the circumstances. And I imagine many of us are excited that 2020 is leaving us. Not that maybe our faith in the future has been shot a little bit here this year, but looking back on 2020, we had remember the cluster of planets that's now starting to separate up here. We had Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. They were all in Capricorn near where Pluto is now. And so that really spelled the theme for 2020, which had a lot to do with restriction, Saturn part, in power and control, that Pluto part, and then the desire to break free, essentially, and that's the Jupiter part there. And so that was all setting the stage for 2020. And I'd said at the beginning of last year that 2020 would be a precedent-setting year, that whatever does happen, something very, very significant, I suspected at the time, and it would set a precedent for how things move forward. Now, that being said, if you watched that webinar From Hierarchy to Sovereignty, I go over the movement of Regulus, the fixed star, from Leo here into Virgo, which happened in 2011, but I explained in that video how what that shift means in terms of power structures in the world, and how it's a gradual process that's kind of playing itself out, and how 2020 in fact accelerated that transition from Regulus in Leo to Regulus in Virgo, as we've seen the collapse of certain hierarchical structures, even in terms of like Hollywood and sports and entertainment and politicians, and the pedestals have begun to start falling down here in 2020. And so that is also a part of that triple conjunction of Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter in Capricorn, which is a sign that deals with powerful organizations and things like that, like governments and corporations and whatnot. And so despite the negative aspects of the COVID-19 situation and the lockdowns and everything else, on a more positive note, if you are one that has the intention of having people be more informed about what reality actually is, what secrets there are that we should know about. This what I think now, looking back on 2020, is this was the beginning of the shakedown of the secrecy, a shakedown of the ability for information to be only known amongst the higher levels of a hierarchy and not amongst the masses. And so with the shift of Regulus from Leo into Virgo, we're kind of inevitably moving away from that hierarchy into more of a sovereign power structure. And so 2020 has just been a kickoff in that direction. Okay. Now, that being said, just as a review of 2020, 2020 also featured a Venus retrograde. So we had Venus, it actually retrograded in the sign of Gemini earlier this year in the late spring, early summer. And we had Mars retrograde in Aries here late in the year, like September to November. In fact, it's still in the shadow zone of its recent retrograde. It just went direct, I think, mid-November. Yeah, mid-November it went direct. So it's still marching itself out of the shadow, which will actually happen here in just a few days. I think it was about 28 degrees of Mars, if I'm not mistaken, where it went retrograde back in September. So right after the new year, pretty much, Mars is going to be out of its shadow zone. And so we won't see Mars retrograde in 2021. And for the most part, we won't have any Venus retrogrades until the very, very end of the year. In fact, it'll be, I think, December 19th. So just before the solstice next year, Venus will again go retrograde, but it's going to be most of 2021 without one. And of course, Mercury will have its 3 retrogrades like it has every year. Every few months, it's going to go retrograde for about 3 weeks. Okay, and so in 2020, with Mars and Venus both having a retrograde period, creativity may have been stifled a bit here in 2020, which makes sense why that might happen to any one of us. Kind of being restricted from engaging in the activities we love and things like that. That's kind of what that represents. Venus and Mars have a lot to do with social planets, and they were held back here in 2020. But in 2021, well, I'll actually kind of zip forward for us here, and I'm gonna kind of go back and forth across the year here, so it won't be in total chronological order, but just in terms of Mars and Venus. So they're pretty far apart from each other here, starting on January 1st. But if we whip through the months, I believe it is sometime in mid-July. So we'll move it up into that period. I think it was something like mid-July. Where is it? Come on, click into place for me. It's not moving for me. Anyway, but this is mid-June, that's why. Duh. There we go. Mid-July, we have Venus, Mars conjunct. So Venus moves faster than Mars, so Venus up here right now is going to catch up to Mars and join it there in mid-July. And that's in Leo. And so that's a very creative sign, and this linking of energies is very creative in itself. So when 2020 had some restrictions on our creativity and our sociability, 2021, once we get to the middle part of the year, really shows the opposite kind of energy, like high degree of sociability and creativity. So that, in addition to where the Mercury retrogrades are going to be happening this year, and they're happening all in air signs. I think the first one is here in late May, something like that. Yeah, there it is right there. It's in Gemini, I believe. There it is. So get the black color there when it's still going direct. So as of May 29th, around May 29th, May 30th is when it's going to turn retrograde. So now it's red. And so it'll retrograde as you move forward in time, all the way into about mid-June or so. But that's going to all be in Gemini, air sign, okay? The next retrograde, actually, that's actually the middle retrograde in the year. Our first retrograde actually happened here in January. A little off my game here. Anyway, I think it starts right around the 30th. Yeah. So there's Mercury in Aquarius, air sign. So it's going to go retrograde there. So basically the first few weeks of February, we've got a Mercury retrograde in Aquarius. And then we're going to have, again, that one I just showed you there, that's going to be in, for the most part, early to mid-June, starting in very late May. And then our final retrograde happens in Libra, the other air sign. So there's 3 air signs, Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra, and all 3 of them will have Mercury retrograde in those air signs. And so I think the next one, or the final one, I should say, for the year is in something like late September. Yeah, there it is. There's Mercury retrograde in Libra at that time, late September into mid-October. Okay, and so air signs are social signs. Okay, and so Mercury retrograding in the, Mercury, which represents communication and information, in these very social signs, in a year where Venus and Mars are going to join each other, which only happens every couple of years. So it doesn't happen every year, and it's in a very creative sign like Leo. So we have sociability and creativity on a high note here in 2021, and that's very different from 2020 energy. Okay, and so what occurs that actually allows us to set up where there's more sociability, more freedom, essentially. That we'll discuss some of that here as we enter 2021, because Jupiter is when things really kick off. Jupiter, what are we doing in January is going to really kick things off, is what I meant to say. Anyway, so January, February is going to be a very potent period for setting the stage for this coming year. So if we come back, we'll just move it into mid-January roughly. So you can already see kind of what's happening here. All right, so when we're in mid-January, we're going to see Jupiter, which again just made its conjunction on December 21st. I spoke about that in my last video, and it was all over social media. You know, the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius, and you know that really did signify the breakup of that triple conjunction that ruled all of 2020. So they really, you know, they broke away from Pluto, but then they also broke away from the sign that Pluto's in as well. And so it's a whole new energy. And I entitled this video the game changer year. This is a year that the game changes, and the changes to that game happen immediately here in January. And of course, in the U.S., we have the inauguration, which comes on the 20th, which is not a big change from where it was there a week before. But notice what we have on the 20th of January. Not a quiet day for sure. Mars conjunct Uranus. That's very potent for unexpected events, unexpected actions. Okay, so don't think. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and you don't either. And any of us claim that we know exactly what's going to happen that day, then we're probably going to be wrong. Okay, and that is going to be making a square to Jupiter. I should say, it's probably better to say Jupiter is squaring that conjunction, and that's also pretty potent because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, and so it's part of this alignment here, and whatever Jupiter touches, it amplifies, and so it's going to be an amplifier and squaring too. It's a hard aspect, amplifying this surprise action energy on that date and surrounding days too. But it will be happening on that date as well. But it'll be building up a couple days before and lingering a couple days after. So that week, the third week in January, is going to be pretty potent. It's only 3 weeks from now, and so what comes of that? It's anybody's guess. But just note that Saturn is right behind its heels. And in fact, about a month later, starting in February, if we just kind of shoot up to February, did it let me do it? There we go. Now you see where Saturn is at 7 degrees, and it's, Mars is gone now, but it's going to be making that same square to Uranus that Jupiter just made in January. The difference being Saturn's slower. It's going to do its annual retrograde like it does every year. And so it's going to make this square for the first time in February, but the last square that it makes to Uranus and Taurus will be in late December, so the very end of 2021. So this is essentially the theme of the game changer year. Is Uranus and Taurus is highlighted, and it's first it's when Jupiter squares it while Mars is conjunct with it, and the second phase of this is the rest of the year, which is February through December, when Saturn is squaring it, kind of holding the reins essentially. Okay, and so without getting into specifics, 2021 looks like the kind of a year where, again, the game changes, and it changes because of something that develops, some information that leaks out, comes to the public attention, okay? And so with all that sociability going on with the Mercury retrogrades and air signs, and with Venus and Mars conjunct in mid-July here in Leo, I get the sense, my intuition, just looking at this, is things have kind of been building here in 2020 with the kind of breaking of the walls in the beginning of the crumble of that hierarchy. I just get this feeling like it's going to be a year of some massive disclosures, and the repercussions of that, what that information then means, is going to change everything, and everything that means, especially with Uranus and Taurus, we're talking economically. So just as an example, Aquarius being, about the future and technology and everything else, and in Uranus ruling technology, et cetera, because it rules Aquarius, there could be breakthrough technologies that change everything. So for example, I'm not predicting this specifically, but if a method of treating a disease like cancer or something comes out that destroys an entire industry that is looking for a cure for cancer, right? And everything that's invested in that financially would collapse immediately. It's a good news, but the idea is that it changes everything. So I get this sense that in 2021, it was going to be some major financial changes, major societal changes, as a result of developments, whether it's technological inventions, whether it's information that changes everything, which is probably a combination of both. Um, and again, the continuing crumble of the hierarchy. So this is people in high places getting dethroned, essentially, for as a matter of speaking, not necessarily literally, but exposure of certain key people in high places could be a huge part of 2021 and our experience with it. And I think there's going to be, whereas specific to the virus, I think there is going to be more freedom this year. So something happens there, and it doesn't seem to make sense. If you're watching the news right now, we're talking about a new strain coming out, and how even if you have the vaccine, you still got to lock down. You got California saying that the lockdowns are indefinite now with a quarterly review. So in other words, they're just not even going to look at what the data is saying. They're just going to lock down and review later. And the societal unrest that can also be part of this Aquarian energy, this Saturn Aquarius squaring Uranus for most of the year, starting with the Jupiter squared Uranus while it's conjunct Mars. So think of it as starting, boom, in our face in January. Wow, big surprises we didn't expect. Boom, boom, boom. And then, the repercussions of that, of how that changes society over the rest of the year. And Saturn kind of holds the reins of the Uranian energy, which can be wild and unpredictable, right? But with Saturn there, it's going to help it blurt out in bits and pieces instead of all at once, and that will help things be more digestible. That's probably a good word to use for it. But we could be really, really in for some surprises here to start the year in January. And it's only going to be the opening of the Pandora's box that will be this sort of like boom and wow moments that basically litter the entire landscape of 2021. Lots of eureka moments, things like that. So I think ultimately it's a positive thing, because we have to break those chains, essentially, like that we have been under with Regulus in Leo. Again, go back to that video back in October with the hierarchy to sovereignty, because Regulus in Leo has been how the power structure has been defined. It's very imbalanced. The higher you are in the hierarchy, the more power you have, and et cetera, et cetera. And that also coincided essentially with the age of Pisces, where the North Pole is pointing, basically. And Pisces is an age, run by emotion and belief. Okay, and so when you have this hierarchical structure that runs the world according to beliefs, and you can't question beliefs and things like that, it's very abusive, right? Because and what we're seeing right now is the end phase of that as it's leaving us. A lot of people are talking about how the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius here ushered in the age of Aquarius, and it's a gradual transition. But yes, and I think in many ways it is kind of like a beginning of that act. So we're moving away from that age of feeling and belief and into one of reason and logic and science. So yes, question the data always. That's what science is all about: questioning data, using common sense. And with Regulus and Virgo, you have a more common sense way of structuring power in a more sovereign individual pieces of power, rather than an all-encompassing global aspect. And so what we're seeing is this final push right now, using the coronavirus, using climate change, using whatever pretext for global social control that these people in the high places can use. They're really pushing for it right now, talking about the Great Reset, which they used to call the New World Order, right? But if you're paying attention, it's the same thing. And so that they're using the coronavirus as an excuse to reset everything, and et cetera. But ultimately, energetically, that cannot survive. That cannot survive in this new energy we're entering, which you could say that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius signified the door opening to that. Okay, and now the big booms come in January, and then February. You can see it right here. We're in February, and look at all the planets that are in Aquarius. And if we can go back a couple of days, and it's even more. Now we get the Sun in Aquarius. So you got Saturn, Mercury's retrograding in Aquarius with Jupiter, Venus, the Sun. So there's a mega stellium. That's what they call that when there's a lot of planets in one area, right there in Aquarius. So this Aquarian, this logic, this reason, this scientific development kind of energy comes at us with a boom in January and February, it's kind of setting, like, how is this going to set itself into place around the world, you know? Um, and so what, and it's also interesting that Jupiter is going to pass through Aquarius. And then for a couple of months from May to July, it's going to be in Pisces before it goes back into Aquarius to finish the year. So to spend a couple of months in Pisces. And so that's kind of signifying the merger between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius, right? Because Jupiter is going to hang out and cross that path a few times during this year. In fact, it'll be just before the end of the year, I think like December 28th or something like that, where it'll then re-enter Pisces. And, 2022 is Jupiter in Pisces for the most part the whole year. But 2021 is going to feature in Aquarius to start with the booms, a couple of months in Pisces just to play with that border or that boundary between Aquarius and Pisces, and then it comes back to Aquarius to finish the year. But generally speaking, it's an Aquarian year for Jupiter. It'll be most of the year will be in Aquarius. So this Aquarian energy is going to be very strong in the early part of the year, and then again in the end of the year. Okay, and so very strong Aquarian energy that started with the solstice just last week. That kind of set this whole thing off. Okay, and this is the kind of energy that, again, the old guard that I've been calling it in previous videos, the old guard that really runs according to this Regulus and Leo energy, that's crumbling, and they can't function in this kind of energy that we're having coming in. Okay, they are pushing hard, and it's a Hail Mary pass right now. They're really pushing for it. And you can see the entire election in the US is really, it's very easy to see who the players are. When it comes like now, this old guard energy was invested in both parties up until Trump got into presidency, which he wasn't supposed to do, as they were invested in, that it never mattered who won. You can go back to different presidencies, and it never really mattered. And Trump wasn't supposed to win, and so he wasn't considered a threat to the system. That Hillary was going to win, and they were going to move things in a certain direction with her. It got ruined, so things got disrupted there. But they still have a chance that they can push somebody in against Trump to get him out of there. And that's why you end up with what we have, Biden, which is could have been anybody really, because it had nothing to do with him. Obviously, he wasn't that popular even, amongst those who lean left. He wasn't even popular. So it's obvious he's just there for a face of familiarity or something, whatever it is. But this is the last ditch effort from a U.S. perspective of how to get the global structure into the US. But again, it's happening at a bad time. It's kind of too late to do it. So even if, and as of right now, it's, Biden is going to be inaugurated on the 20th, right? That's what we're told anyway. And even if that happens, that doesn't mean that, oh, the old guard won and the new reality will never happen. It's not true. This battle between the old guard and the new reality that basically 2020 represented, it's ultimately won by the new reality, no matter what happens, no matter who is president. It doesn't really matter. It's ultimately not important. It's just going to be a different scenario. I've said in previous videos, the Trump path, if Trump were to win and become, be re-inaugurated, it's a more direct and deliberate path toward this new energy. You might think, well, Trump's an a-hole and he doesn't do things good for humanity. And it's like, well, getting rid of the structures that try to own humanity is not the worst thing. And he's deliberately, making policy decisions that do that, like defunding the World Health Organization, for example, getting out of the Paris Climate Accord. No matter who wins, it's either going to be a deliberate path toward this new reality where things are disclosed and people in high places fall, or it's going to happen as a result of those energies and those forces in power essentially revealing themselves in real time. So it'll be hard to deny, hard to ignore what we're seeing in front of our faces. Like we might see certain policies suddenly get enacted that make everyone, even those that voted for Biden, for example, say, what? There's no way we can, that's not cool, So in other words, the true colors get revealed because it's not really that party anymore. It's just, that's where all of the globalist eggs are in that basket, essentially right now, just because it's a way to get Trump out of the way, and that's it. But that will expose itself, in other words, if that's the path that happens. But I don't think, looking at the energy of, again, if you go back to the inauguration, looking at that energy, again, expect the unexpected that day. This is an energy of surprise. That whole week is a very surprising week. So, we we don't know exactly what's going to happen there, and it could very well be that even though we're being told by mainstream media that Biden is going to be inaugurated, and so again, that would just be that path, a self-revealing path. But it could very well be Trump too, or there could be some other strange scenario that we can't even think of. Okay. But either way, whatever plays out, it's that new reality that's burgeoning into our awareness no matter what. So there's just, easier paths, and there's, more difficult paths, but there's no wrong way, just sometimes there's a long way, right? And so if these globalist interests get into power in the US, it's a longer way, but it still will happen. You see, because it's the demise is ultimate here. So this looks like a pretty exciting, interesting year, to say the least. Um, uh, Definitely feels like there's going to be more loosening. So even if there are strict lockdowns entering 2021, I think the rebellion, that's societal unrest, is going to be pretty strong. So businesses are just going to say no when they're told to close. I think it's going to be that kind of rebellious energy. And considering whatever happens with the election, it's going to probably result in some unrest one way or the other. Okay, so I'd expect more unrest in that sense, but ultimately, this is all leading to more information getting out there, more information circulating. That's a lot about what those air signs represent. And again, Mercury's retrograding in all those air signs this year, so lots of circulation of information. And once you get that toothpaste out of the tube, you can't put it back in, and that's really where we're going from here. And so there's no going back to the old energy. We're leaving it. And 2021 is kind of an accelerant into this new reality. And I think it's going to be a new reality that involves new technologies. And who knows where that technology comes from? It's stuff that's been hidden for a while, whatever it is. And it could, if there's ever a year that there would be alien disclosure or UFO disclosure of some kind, this would be it. Because that would be definitely a game changer kind of situation for sure. And it could be that the game has changed because there's certain technologies we've had that have been hidden from us that basically changed the whole game and changed the entire economy because of it. Okay, that's just an idea of what could happen. Some kind of a crazy, surprising, specific kind of event that would represent or be represented by these energies. But anyway, it already looks like a better year than 2020, but that's just a judgment on my side of things. I think we are entering a better energy, a freer energy in general over the next few years. And I think what we witnessed in 2020 again has been that beginning of the collapse of all of the structures that have prevented our freedoms. Okay, and it's all starting to fall. So anyway, if you have any questions, please let me know. Again, Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony. If you're interested in looking at 2021 and what it looks like in your chart, also feel free to reach out. I do readings via Zoom to anywhere pretty much, so we can always work something out. So again, thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of the holidays and enjoy entering what looks like a very interesting, exciting, and surprising 2021 that changes the game forever. Thanks for stopping by.